Okay, 1 second. I have to share my screen. But I see it. Something is wrong, you know. 1 second. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, I see it. Yeah, my mistake. Okay.
To intro.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome everyone to Test Automation webinar. Today I will try to answer the question: do we need the automated test at all? Or and if we do, then how to do this properly? So before I start, a few general things. The first one is about questions. Feel free to ask about anything during the presentation. I will try to answer as many questions as possible. You can use a special section on your sidebar there. And what's cool, there is also voting functionality. So if you find any existing question interesting, then feel free to vote for it. So it will make our life easier. Most of the question I will try to answer during the special Q&A section at the end of the presentation. But yeah, so I guess this is like most of those are all of the general things here. So let's start. My name is Adam Polak. I'm the head of Node.js at the Software House. This is the company in Poland, in Gliwice. We mostly specialize in front-end, especially React, Angular, and Vue applications, backend, PHP, Node, such things, mobile, and also testing. Yeah, so if you need something from those fields, then feel free to write to us, and I'm sure we can help you. What's more, I also encourage you to go to our website, tsh.io. We have a wonderful blog there, so you can see, you can read about a lot of cool business-related stuff, but also technical ones. So yeah, feel free to go there. And especially for people who are from region of Silesia, there is also a very cool career page. So yeah, we are like recruiting a lot of people, mostly developers. Okay, so that's, I guess that's everything about the TSH. So maybe something about me. So just as I said, my name is Adam Polak. I'm head of Node.js at the Software House. And I've been building web applications for about 7 years. During that time, I started with startup applications. Then I moved to enterprise-grade solutions. I was working on both front-end and back-end. And during that time, I developed tons of different features. What I've learned is how important it is to test things. So at some point at TSH, we decided to do something with our testing process, because back then it wasn't so developed. Yeah, we started with nothing. We even wasn't sure if we need tests at all. So before we built our testing department, we wanted to answer one simple question: why do we need tests? Yeah, so because we have wonderful developers who do unit tests, who knows how to test things. So every time I create, for example, a new feature, I actually do some checks if it works properly. The problem is that even though I do such things, I always follow the same path. At least most of the time, I have some predefined data, and I'm trying to check if it works. And my feature will work eventually, but probably for sure it will work for this cases. So for this single case with those information, those data. What if we change something? So we decided that we need the test to actually check if it works for any kind of a data. So we need those special people whose main responsibility is to break stuff, yes, to actually try to break my feature, to find it some problems with it, some issues, and then move it back to me so I can fix it. But this is only about the current functionality, that single module, that single feature we created. There is a kind of an edge case in software development when by adding something new, I will break something existing, yeah, and this is what we call regression, yeah. So, yeah, it might sound crazy, yeah. How it is possible that I added a new feature and we think that it's not connected with any other, yet by adding it, I break like half of the application. So we need to think a little about how the development process works, how the developers code their stuff. I mean, we try to reuse as much code as possible, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over again. Yeah, so we are able to create a single module that will be used in multiple different places by multiple different features. So when I do a single update there, I'm not only changing it for my new feature, I'm also changing it for everything that depends on it. So I changed a single line of code, and then everything goes crazy because this single change has so much impact on the whole system. So the second thing we decided that we need tests for is to actually prevent this situation. Yeah, so to make sure that everything works perfectly even after we add something new. So like all of the previous functionalities are still working properly. And then mobile happens. I mean, we started to do mobile apps, and there is like one single feature that is very important for your app to be successful. It's look, and if it feels it feels good. I mean, the user experience is so good that we want to use it. And this is also something we decided that it would be good to test, yeah, to check if the application looks the same as on designs, if it behaves the way that our UX department decided it to work. And this is something I noticed that a lot of companies are actually skipping. Yeah? They don't find it so important to check to follow the designs, to follow the designer ideas. Okay, so we started with those 3 simple ideas. We started with, of course, there were many more, but we decided that, yeah, let's go with those 3 and try to build a process that will allow us to test things. So we decided to build a testing process. It was a very simple one. Back then, it was mostly manual. So I, as a developer, created a new feature, gave it to my tester, and he starts to define some use cases that he can test for. Yeah, so we call those scenarios. We can imagine that this is actually the kind of a document where we have the steps to be reproduced, yeah, like one by one, how to test a given feature, and then we also have the special section with the expected result. When we create those single file, those single document, we can put it on the pile of all of the existing scenarios. So like, you know, we built like more and more and more, and then we go all the way through them like one by one and check if everything works. Yeah, so this is actually regression testing. So at first it worked perfectly. I mean, what could go wrong? Yeah, it's a simple thing. Yeah, create a scenario, test it, and check if everything works. Yeah, the problem is that development is an infinite process. Yeah, we are constantly adding new features. We are building new stuff. We are adding functionalities, and the problem is that together with it, the time required for testing keeps growing. Yeah, it will grow infinitely, and sooner or later you will reach the 1 or even 2 hour mark for a single set of for the single test. Yeah, so this could be a problematic. So at this point, we decided that we have to do something with it. So the answer was quite obvious. Yeah, let's automate.
There's a question.
Okay, I see there is a question about how do we test if the app looks and feels good, actually. And there are few possible things, ways you can test it. I mean, to test the look, you can actually, there are automated tools, for example, Galen, that will allow you to test the positioning of the elements or if they have the proper styling. But most of the time, we actually depends on our testers. Like we have the designs ready by our design department, so we can check against it if it looks the same as on the design. And in case of the UX, we also have, for example, we use Sketch. Yeah, so we know the designer can show us how it should behave. Yeah, so if something is if the app is not following this process, the way the designer decided to go, or the UX designer, then a tester is responsible to throw it back and give it back to developer and say that something is not working properly. There is another one. Are you going to say something about Jest enzyme and or continuous integration delivery deployment with tests? Sadly, we are not going to dive so much into the code, so I'm not going to show the things related to the concrete framework or even the CI and CD. We will talk a little about the problems with it, but yeah, this is not the webinar where we are going to talk about this. I mean, this is quite extensive topic. Okay, so let's go back to our main subject. So we decided to, we need to automate things. So at this point, I would like you to play a little with us. So we published a poll. You can click on this section on the sidebar and answer a very simple question. What if you use the automated test, and if you do, then what type of test do you use in your system? Okay, so going back, we decided to go with automates, and the most obvious answer here for the most companies, that the young companies that are starting with automates, are going with something called end-to-end tests, or someone could call it UI tests, or such things. Yeah. The problem is that we are all going the wrong way. End-to-end, it's not the final answer you should follow. Yeah. There are actually other possibilities. I mean, it's not like end-to-ends are bad on their own. Yeah, but there is some issues with them. But about this a little later. So let's start with something simpler. What is the end-to-end test itself? So end-to-end testing has a very good definition. Yeah, it's a testing methodology where we test a single flow from the start to finish. I mean, it's pretty descriptive. I mean, it's quite easy definition to understand. But let's give an example. Yeah, so probably the most popular one is about e-commerce shop, so the product ordering flow, so where we want to buy something. So I am the user. we go to the some kind of a product listing. Yeah, we see the all available products to me. I search the one that I want to buy. I go with it, click on it, get to the details page, and then I click the buy button there. We end up on some kind of a ordering type where we have to fill all of the details: first name, last name, address. We have to select the payment option, and if it's processed, or even if it's not, yeah, we still end up on some kind of a summary page that tells us where we are at, what transaction status currently have. So we can test one single flow, and together with it, multiple different modules. Because I mean, it looks simple, yeah. It looks like actually a cool thing. Yeah, we are testing everything together using one single scenario. Yeah, so yeah, it's cool. And what we are doing underneath is we are testing multiple different APIs, because most modern applications are actually split into something called services. Yeah, so it's quite popular to go with the service-oriented architecture currently. Like a few years ago, most of us wanted to go with microservices, and currently the feature of the month is the service-oriented architecture. So when we go to our application, when we start with the listing of the possible offers, we are actually calling some API, for example, products API. And then when we start a new transaction, we are actually locking the product, so we have enough time to fill the form and buy it. But we are also starting a new transaction, and we might have a specialized transaction system. It's quite common to have those to actually separate the transaction from the rest of the system to make it more secure in some ways. Then we go to the payment option, we choose one, and I'm pretty sure you are not processing payment by yourself. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you are using some external APIs, some external gateway. For example, in Poland, it's quite popular to use PayU or .pay. But in case of the whole world, it's probably, it could be PayPal, for example, yeah, or Stripe or something else. So we are actually using our transaction API, we are calling something external, and we are waiting for transaction status. So then when we get the summary, we see the status that, for example, my payment is still processing. And of course, every time the status change, we should send some kind of a confirmation email, yeah? So we are calling some external service, probably maybe Mailjet, maybe SendMail, or any other possible, that any other known service to actually send emails, yeah, transactional emails. So yeah, it sounds cool, yeah. It looks great. I mean, I'm writing a simple test, simple scenario, and I'm testing everything all together. So where is the catch? Because I said that we are going the wrong way. So again, it's not about the end-to-end itself. I mean, those tests are still good. The problem is the way we use them. When we started to think about automated tests, we were so focused on end-to-end itself that we forget that there are many, many more. Yeah, that it's not only about UI tests, it's actually about everything connected to them. Because there, just as I said, there are some issues I see with end-to-end testing. The first thing is that they are actually slow. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are still much faster, like 100 times faster than any manual, yeah? But the problem with them is that a single end-to-end test, the UI test, have to wait for any response to come. So if we process something, if our API process something in slow manner, like for example, it takes a second or two, we will still have to wait those seconds to get this response. And since we test the whole flow, it all adds up, it sums up, and we might end with a test that it requires, for example, a few seconds, or rather, I mean, it would be good to have a test with a few seconds that to actually finalize. If we compare it to the different alternatives, like for example unit tests or integration tests, then it's actually quite different, because when a single end-to-end test is taken, for example, let's be optimistic. It takes 1 second. Yeah, I would like my end-to-end test to take 1 second. In this time, I can execute probably 100 of different unit tests, because those take usually a few milliseconds. So yeah, it's much less than you think so. What's more, I'm telling that they are slow because a good practice is to split the test cases into multiple ones. So if we have the same flow, for example, buying, validating, and handling some alternative flows, yeah. So we are actually not creating a single test that will go through all of them at once. Yeah, we are actually creating 3 different scenarios. So we will still have to go through searching of an offer. We will still have to go through details of the offer, clicking on the buy button to actually go all the way to the ordering type, so we can finally validate. So we will have to duplicate a few different. We will have to duplicate some actions that that it's also the way that the user will go through it. Yeah. So this is one of the reasons I don't really like end-to-end tests to be the main source of your automates, because if it ends up with like having a 1 hour test suite, I'm pretty sure your developers will start to think how to reduce it, how to skip some of those tests to deploy it faster to production. Because keep in mind that every time you want to deploy something, you should run the whole suite. You should wait this 1 hour or even more to actually before you deploy something, just to make sure that everything works perfectly. The next point is it requires infrastructure. I mean, we are testing the real service, the whole service at once. So we require the databases, services. We require something for even those external services like payment gateways. I mean, do we have them? Do we have some sandbox? Do we have some fake implementation for it, or we are using the real one? If we are using the real one, then how do we handle the payment situation? Because this is the real money. Yeah? We have to connect the real credit card. So are we going to spend some money every time we try to do testing, or like we are going to skip it and do it once a day and then and for most of the tests use just the fake implementation, so like we can kind of mock it and hack it that we won't lose so much money. Yeah? It gets a little easier if you are using the Docker containers. I mean, it won't take so much time to actually build a single container and deploy it to some kind of a server and connect them together. But back then, when we started, we didn't have so cool tools like Docker, like any virtualization functionalities. So we could actually like build a single container and deploy it everywhere. So infrastructure, and what's more, infrastructure is also a kind of a cost. Yeah, it's a resource that you have to pay for. So in order to test it, you need a special, probably special machine special environment where you can do those tests. Another thing is end-to-ends, especially in case of web apps, are quite sensitive to UI changes. I mean, I saw a lot of companies that decided to go with end-to-ends and then decided to rebuild the whole front-end application, like not once, but multiple times in a single month. And this is the cost you will have to take into account. Yeah, every time you create a test, you need, because you use the browser, some kind of you try to mimic a real user. So probably you are going with the browser, or in case of the mobiles, maybe you are using the emulators or testing on the real devices. It is possible. So every time you change something on the UI, you have to go back to your test. You have to fix them. You have to change them, and it's not so complicated. I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of changing the selector itself, so the way we access the elements on the website. But the other time is actually changing the everything, like the whole flow. So it is a cost that you have to be ready for. And the last thing, this is something I was talking about before. So those tests meant to be executed like repeatedly, yeah, so many times. So every time you probably want to integrate something to the staging or to the production or deploy it, you should execute them. And so you want them to be fast because you want to be able to deploy as soon as possible, especially in case of hot fixes. Yeah, there is like a very simple fix I have to do, and just as I said earlier, it's not like I'm changing a single line and it will only have an impact on a single feature. I'm actually changing a single line and it might have an impact on the whole system. So I cannot just skip the end-to-end tests at all. I have to integrate them into my CI, into my continuous delivery, continuous deployment process, and execute them. So imagine that in order to fix something like very, very important, you have to wait 1 or even more hours to do so. So yeah, so it might be a problem. And then we still have that case with transaction systems. So if we execute them like few times a day, let's imagine that 10 times, and we have our e-commerce system, and we even decided to have a special product that costs a single $1, then if we execute those tests every day 10 times, then it actually adds up to $310 every month. I mean, not every. There are some exceptions, but I mean, it's a real money you are going to lose. So you need to think how to solve that. You need to think if you are going to test the payment process every time or only like a few times a day and then use the real money. And in any different situation, you are going to go with the some fake implementation. So I said that there are I said that end-to-end tests are not the problem itself. It's rather the way we use them. So let's talk about this. I guess some of you are familiar with something called test pyramid. This is actually, if you don't know what it is, then this is the way your test suite should be built around. Yeah. So on the very bottom, we have those most important things like what is the foundation of our system. Yeah. So in our case, it's the unit test. So we need those things to test something fully isolated. A good example, let's imagine we have a system that allows us to test if the credit card number is correct. So we have this cool application that has a single input there and single button submit. And when I type the wrong credit card number and click the submit button, then I get the red circle somewhere that informs me that the credit card is invalid. So where do we use end-to-ends here? We can use them on both front-end and back-end. I will focus on back-end here, but just as someone mentioned, we could use the unit test and integration test could be also created on the front-end side, and I encourage you to do so. So, for example, in case of the React, you can use the mentioned Jest and Enzyme libraries. It's a very good. It's actually a very good. Both of them are very good libraries to do so. So we have the unit test. So the example one could be, for example, a function, a single function. I'm not talking about the whole system. A single function that will, given the credit card number, it will just return a true or false. True if the number is correct and false if it's incorrect. Yeah. So I'm going to test this single thing. I don't have to set up the whole infrastructure for it. I mean, unit tests are designed to be executed on a level of a single file. So I don't have to set the whole application for it. I actually can execute a single file and it will just work. Yeah, if it's done properly. And this is something that will take a matter of milliseconds and not the seconds or even more. Yeah. But still, those tests are fully isolated. So I can create multiple functions that works in isolation, and then when I connect them together, it will end up with something unexpected. Yeah, I mean, the integration between them could be a problem. So then a layer above are the integration tests. And this is something to check if the modules, the functions, or even the whole services together are working properly. So let's start with something simple. So again, our example with the credit card number. So just as I said, we have this cool application with a front end, and we then have a back end. And on the back end, we could have we probably will have something that handles the request from the SPA from our front end. Yeah, so we change the user data that was sent to the server to some kind of a abstraction. Let's call this abstraction the phone credit card type. And by having it, we will check in a simple integration test if when we pass the correct data, the credit card number, if the validation was executed, and if it returned the true value true, and the field credit card number was marked as valid. Yeah. So right now using the integration test, we are able to check if the my credit card number type is communicating with my function, if it's using it properly. But integration tests are also meant for services. I mean, once again, our cool example with the e-commerce. Yeah, we probably have some transaction system, and a lot of people are using the specialized system to send emails, to send any messages. Those are separated, but we don't need to set up the whole UI, like everything related to the transaction to the ordering flow, to actually test if given the transaction has passed, if the mail, the status confirmation mail should be sent to the user. Yeah, we don't need to set the products API. We don't need to set some kind of a reporting API, administration API. Like, I mean, a lot of services that are not used in cooperation with with this single flow. Yeah, we can skip them. We can just set my transaction process and connect it to my email service, and manually send the request, or using some kind of a specialized library in the language you are using to write the automated tests. Send the request and then check if the email was sent. Yeah, I don't need the whole UI for it to check this, to test this integration. And at the end, at the very top of this pyramid, we have end-to-end tests. And this is to test everything all together. But as you see, we call it pyramid. And the reason behind it is that the number of tests in a given group is constantly getting lower. Yeah, we start with something big. We start like with a lot of different unit tests. We then go with a smaller amount of integration tests, and then we should have a few. I mean, a few is maybe not a good description, because it's hard to determine how many of end-to-end tests you can afford. But it's much easier in case of if we determine it by the percent of percent. Yeah, so the number of in comparison to the whole test suite. So
you have a question.
Oh yeah, we have a question. How do you estimate automation efforts? When we should start automation during development or after? This is the question I'm going to answer in like a few minutes, because I have a slide for it. So I will skip it for now, and then we'll go back for it. in my opinion, your test suite should be based on unit and integration mostly. I mean, you still should have the end-to-end, and they are still great, yeah. But you should start with having a good development process. So this is so actually the unit and integration test. And what's more, in our company at TSH, we decided that a good suite should take maximum of 20 minutes. We saw that if it takes more, and I mean not like a few minutes more, but like 1 hour. This is a good example. The 1 hour is actually a pretty good example. If it takes so much, then people start to think how to skip them, how to not execute them every time, because it's getting to be issue with every deploy we have to make, or every fix we have to do. Yeah, so we try to reduce that time to maximum of 20 minutes. Of course, we are able to execute the integration, units, and end-to-end tests all together at once. So it's not like we have the time for unit tests, and then we have a time for, then the remaining time is for the integration test, and then remaining time from both of those is only for end-to-end. The general idea is to have the whole suite to be executed in maximum of 20 minutes to end up with in this time. Yeah. So at some point, as I said, your test suite should be built against this pyramid, and it should be based on it. And most of your tests should be unit ones. So there is a company, like a quite popular one. It's called Google. And those are their numbers. Yeah, they try to reach the 70% of unit ones, 20 of integration, and only 10%. I mean, only 10% of end-to-end ones. I mean, this is not so much. In some companies, I saw that this number those numbers are a little different. For example, I know a company where only 5% of tests are end-to-end, and then the remaining number is moved back to the integration, so they have more integration than end-to-end. But what is important is this comparison. Yeah, you always should focus to have the most of unit, then a little more of integration, and then at the end the end-to-end. But I mean, yeah, this number is quite low. Yeah, so the question is, what should be tested with end-to-end? Which flow should be tested with using the end-to-end tests at all? So from my experience, I like to ask a simple question to my client. So where is the money? Yeah. So what is the most profitable feature you have? And probably in case of e-commerce is, of course, the ordering flow. So this is like the most crucial parts of your application. So you should, even at the start of the development, you should think how to test it properly, because it doesn't matter if your website is working properly, like the listing of the products, or even, I don't know, some cool stuff like displaying popular offers in your system. I mean, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it might work, but you won't earn any money if the transaction process is not working at all. So end-to-ends are actually there to protect the most crucial parts of your system. So the parts that make sure that you still earn money, so your company is profitable. So again, example. Yeah. I know that most of the business is going to tell you that every feature is important. And the cool part of it is that it actually not. Yeah, I mean, there are things like priorities. Yeah, we can decide which one is important and which one is not so important. I mean, yeah, everything is important, but some are a little less. So just as I said, e-commerce shop. Yeah, so I mean, I need to be, in order to buy product, in order to earn money for using the system, I need to be able to search things. Probably filtering is quite important. I mean, in many different e-commerce applications, filtering is something you should also test with end-to-end, because this is something people are using quite extensively. Then I need to be able to display the product so I can see if it's something that I want to really buy, and then I need to be able to add it to cart. Yeah, so this is the functionality, like quite important one. Yeah, and then I need to be able to order it, so to pay for it, to choose the delivery option. So this flow is actually getting bigger and bigger, but it actually makes sense. I mean, this is the flow we should focus on. This is something, the whole flow is so important for us that we need to cover it with as many tests as possible in order to make sure that it works constantly. And what I find also important is sending confirmation emails, because in my case, it's something like when I don't get an email after buying a product, I'm actually starting to think if I should call the support, or if I should send an email to some kind of a contact of your e-commerce shop. Yeah, so I'm actually adding more job to your people. Yeah, so this is also a way of losing money. Yeah, so we need to have a bigger support in order to accommodate the people, the needs of the people. Yeah, because they will keep asking you, okay, where is my product? And you will need a people to answer them that, yeah, your product is on the way. It will soon be delivered. And I'm pretty sure I will ask it like a few times a week, or like every other day to just make sure that it's still in delivery. Yeah. But once again, I said that there are always less important features. And in case of the e-commerce shop, it might be, for example, sorting. And yeah, it sounds crazy how sorting is not so important. But I can give you one single tip. We had a project where majority of users actually use the one single sorting option. Price, ascending, so from the cheapest one to the most expensive one. And if we change it, then suddenly people started to stop to use this functionality, because they didn't find it's worth to actually change it, because the default options were what they were looking for. So we could just skip this single functionality, or rather test it manually instead of adding a special use case for the for the end-to-end test itself. Another case is something I mentioned before, displaying similar products. I see a lot of a lot of shops have this functionality to display what other people bought together with this product. And yeah, it's cool, but what's the point of testing it if the transaction system is not working? I mean, you need to prioritize. Your tester need to think which should be tested using the end-to-ends in order to still maintain the frame of 20 minutes and maintain also to cover as much of the crucial features for you as possible. Okay, so we have one. What tools are you using to test emails? Okay, so we are actually using two different things. One of them is called Mail Trap. This is a special tool that allows you to catch the outgoing emails to the user. So when we send an email from the API, we can forward it to the special to this application. It catches it, and we can use the API to fetch those emails and check it with some automate tests. This is something we have in our framework. I'm going to talk about it a little later, but there are multiple tools. There is Mailtrap, Mailhog, and I guess most of them are based on something called Mail Catcher or something like this. So but yeah, we mostly, in most cases, we use the mail trap because it has a cool user interface. Okay, so now is the point to, now is this question that someone asked before. So when should we start thinking about end-to-end tests? This is a very good question. I mean, a lot of time I hear that it's not so important to have the end-to-end at the start. Yeah, so because the tester will have nothing to do because we have no features, and this is false. I mean, you should think about those immediately because there is a lot of things you have to think about before you start writing the test, and it's not only about the what should be tested. I mean, this could be those are the things that we can think about in a later stage. So we can decide during the some kind of a Scrum meeting if this functionality is going to be tested with end-to-ends or not. But there are things related to the implementation of the application. So, for example, selectors. My tester, in order to be able to access some element, he needs some special handler, some special information that lets him to get this single button on the page. Yeah, so he needs to tell us that, okay, we need to provide, you need to provide me some specialized ID for this elements, so I be able to test it properly. The next thing is architecture itself. Just as I told at the very beginning, is for transaction process. I mean, this is the most common case. The transaction process itself, how to test it properly when we at the same time we want to test the real integration, yet we don't want to lose money. So maybe we should have some specialized service to handle it. So like once a day or few times a day, we are using the real payment system, and then we are switching back to the some kind of a fake implementation. The same goes with fixtures. I mean, some use cases, for example, expired offer. We want to test if the expired offer is not displayed on the website. So how to get the expired offer? I mean, you cannot click it through the admin panel. I mean, it would be quite, yeah, it would be stupid to have this functionality in your admin panel. So somehow you will need to be able to put it there and then remove it. So you can check if the offer is there, if the offer is displayed on the listing. So maybe you need some fixtures, maybe you need some functionality to switch the whole database. But then you have the next question. I mean, you cannot switch database in environment different than staging and probably the QA, special QA environment. You cannot do so on production. So maybe you should also think which test should be a part of the production-ready suite and which should be tested on only on QA environment or even the staging one. Yeah. The next point is request origin. I mean, do we need to know if it's real user or it's the test user? I mean, this is quite useful, especially if you try to do some kind of a conversion test. So you know you need the number of requests to your site that are not that are used by the real user, for example, in Google Analytics, or maybe another, once again, the mentioned transaction process. I mean, we don't want a real user to be ever redirected to the fake service. We want him to use the real one all the time, but we need to know that we need to switch to the fake one for the test user. So those things you need to think, and probably there is much more of those. Tester is someone who has quite large impact on the development process. He knows how to test. He knows how to prepare the system for. He knows what he needs from the system, from your implementation, in order to be able to write tests. Okay, so the question: what should we use for end-to-ends? I'm not going to talk about the unit ones and the integration here. We are going directly to the end-to-ends, and I'm pretty sure that most of you knows Selenium. This is probably the most popular library. This is the one that we used for years. It's designed for web apps, especially. It's implemented in any popular language, from JavaScript to PHP, going through Java, C#, Python, Ruby, and so on and so on. But what I want to tell you is there is also a thing called Puppeteer. This is something quite new. This is developed by Google. It uses headless Chromium underneath. It's because it's something new, it actually fixes some of the problems with Selenium, and it's designed to be easier and designed to be used in much easier way. And what's more, there is even a special Chrome extension you can use. You can use for like creating a code by clicking in the browser. Yeah, so quite a cool thing. The only problem with it is it's implemented only in JavaScript. So if your department is Python based, then it might be a problem. So yeah, we are right now we are on the area of programming language. So let's think, what do we use at TSH? Yeah. Some kind of a recommendation from us. So before we go there, we want to invite you to another poll, this time about what language do you use for your automated tests. Yeah, so feel free to give us an answer, and we go forward. So what do we use at TSH? We are JavaScript company mostly. I mean, everyone in TSH, almost everyone, knows JavaScript to some extent. So it was a good choice, easy choice for us to actually go there and use the JavaScript libraries. So because we know it, yeah. But it's the same for your company. You should use the language you feel the best with. So if you are the Java company, then I'm pretty sure you will try to follow it and use Java for end-to-end testing, because even developers can get to the role of the automated test engineer. So because it's still coding at some point, yeah. And I'm pretty sure they are proficient enough to write those tests. What's fun is we do not use Selenium directly. At some point we wanted to do so, but the problem of it is that in order to use Selenium, you need to know programming language to some point. And when we started with our testing department, our testers didn't have so much experience with programming at all. So we had to make it easier for them to jump in, to learn to use some functionalities. So we decided to go with the Protractor and Nightwatch at start. And the reason is also simple. We used Protractor because back then we were mostly Angular company. So most of our clients were demanding from us to use the Angular framework. And at start it was cool, but then React happened, and I mean, Protractor is a cool feature. Yeah, it's a cool tool. The problem with it is that it's not meant to, without some changes, to work in the same manner with the React or jQuery or Vue or any other framework than the Angular. So we wanted to go with something different. So we went to Nightwatch, and yeah, I mean, this is still a cool library. Yeah, it's not something we found being problematic for us, but the fact that we had to maintain the knowledge of two different frameworks, the Protractor and Nightwatch, was quite a mess. Yeah, because we like to switch people between projects from time to time. I mean, people get bored, people want something new. So then we decided, for example, this tester is going to this project. And what is the problem is one project was based on the Nightwatch and the other one on the Protractor. And you have to change the mindset of the people. You have to learn them new things. So it's actually much better to keep one thing for everything. So, and even what's more, it's even profitable for you to try to write the tests in the same manner all the time, like using the same functionalities, try to reuse the code. So we decided to create our own framework. It's called Kakunin, and it is something that was created to make it easier for our test engineers to switch between projects, and also to allow people who don't know JavaScript so much to actually write the test, because main idea of Kakunin is to write it using the natural language. So this is the Gherkin. Yeah, this is a tool. This is a kind of a language, or rather a form of a language that you write the things using the natural language, and then you execute them, for example, using a library called Cucumber. So now I mentioned the Kakunin. So Kakunin is actually our Endtoend framework. Yeah. So this is something we are using at TSH, and as I mentioned, this is to maybe not forget about manual tests, but to make it easier for our testers, so they don't have to know JavaScript so much. The only thing, especially in the simple cases, is to create something called page object. This is the pattern that most of the test engineers knows and they are familiar with. Yeah, so we are actually creating some kind of a abstraction over the existing web page. For example, in this case, it's the login page, so it has its own URL. I know that under this /login on some domain, it is available, and then I map the elements available on that site. So for example, we have the login form, so we should have the element that has the CSS class dot login form. Yeah, so maybe not dot, but actually the login form class on it. So this is a syntax pretty similar to the jQuery, if your developers are familiar with, and I'm pretty sure that most of the front ends actually know it. So what we are using underneath is still the Protractor, but changed a little way, so we can actually write tests in the same manner in using the React, using the Angular, using the Vue, or any other web framework, or even the static pages. Yeah. So this is the only JavaScript we write the most. I mean, in most of cases, this is the only thing you have to write, because then we go back to. Okay, so I will pause it because I see a quite good question. Did you use or used Cypress.io? I saw this library, and sadly I didn't use it. The moment we saw it is that when we actually were quite extensively using the Kakunin itself. So we didn't find it so cool to actually test it out. But this is something I'm also looking for. The only problem I see with Cypress is, I mean, yeah, it's cool. It's a cool thing, but still, it's not the same we have in the Kakunin. There is one simple difference I will show in like a few seconds. So going back, we are, just as I said, we are using the simplest language available. So the actually the natural language. And the only difference between our approach and the approach that you will see most of the time is that we actually gives you like about 60 different steps ready to go, like you can use in any kind of application to test anything. So they are so generic that we decided to share them with you. And this is the difference. I mean, in case of a Cypress, it's cool. And the same goes with the Protractor. The same goes with any DSL any framework with with its own DSO, but still you have to code it. You have to you need to know programming language to some extent to actually create those steps to connect them. And still, what I guess is that most of the companies are going with the approach called BDD. So we write the test in the manner of from the business perspective. So we are actually creating a new step for every domain we have in project. Yeah. So for example, if we have the e-commerce, we have a specialized steps with the naming related to the system. And then if we have the I don't know, some kind of a betting system, for example, we have the naming related to it. Yeah. The difference in case of Kakunin is that of course, you can still do so. I mean, this is Gherkin. You can write your custom. This is Cucumber. This is Gherkin. You can write your custom step. You can follow the BDD principles and still use it. And what's more, you can use some cool features we have underneath. In our code, for example, the things to fill any kind of a type available on your website with any kind of a field. Like we are getting it. We are able to determine how to fill the given input, judging by its type, and we are doing it on our own. You don't have to specify, for example, that this is the text input. I mean, look at the second step here. I fill the login form with. I mean, we only specify the selector from the page object we use. So in this case, it's the login page, and the value we want to fill it with. I don't need to specify that, for example, this is the file input or this is the CK editor input, and we have the ready implementation there. And what's more, if you need something custom, you can still extend it. So the biggest difference is the way we decided to go with tests. Our approach is much more friendly for companies that have many different products that don't share the domain. So you don't have to switch the mindset of the developers to follow the given naming patterns. You can write those tests from the point of the user, yeah, not the business itself. And there is a point why we do so. I will try to answer it in in a few minutes. But at this point, this is the general idea, to write something once and reuse it as many times as possible. So just as I said, we have about 60 different steps available for you. So you can just jump in and try to test anything available on the internet. Yeah. So this is converted to just as I said, to the real test. So this is how most of the Selenium things works. So we are able to test everything. For example, this is a flow of creating the investor account. So sadly, I cannot show you the way how the scenario looks, but you need to trust me that it's still written using those steps. And what's more, for example, we have here some custom component, custom date picker. And what's cool is, again, we wrote this handler once. We didn't have to create it once again for a different project. I mean, this company that I'm presenting here is decided to go with a pretty much similar look of the many different applications to actually reuse the components between different apps. So we knew that if we implement a special handler for it in a single app, then we could somehow reuse it. And what's more is this is the component that uses some kind of third-party library. So for example, we could create a special handler for select2 library. So this is the kind of a drop-down. So you can actually make it work automatically for any of the third parties you use. Yeah. So This is still open source, so if you have any ideas, feel free to go to Kakunin.io on the GitHub and give us some ideas. How do you answer with Kakunin? Okay, so this is a cool thing. We have a special step that allows us to use multiple different matching strategies. For example, we are able to match to the regular expressions. We are able to match by text. We are able to match by its value. Yeah. So I don't want to go so much into details here. This is something you can check on the Kakunin.io. There is a pretty good documentation of it, and there is the matchers section. If I'm correct, you can even match you can write your custom matcher, your custom regular expression. You can extend it to as much as possible using your own custom code, because this is the way we wrote it. Like, you should be able to create your own stuff that you can share between multiple different projects. So you can actually have like your own custom repository of things related to Kakunins, and then just connect it to use it in your application. And it's quite easy. Most of the time, you just have to define a single code and use a function to connect it to our library. Do you have any issues with testing web components on elements encapsulated by Shadow DOM? And this is a cool thing, because we don't. We are using Kakunin for React apps and also Vue apps, and we have never had any problems with it. Maybe because we tested this on multiple different projects. So we had to overcome some of the issues of Shadow Web. We had to overcome some of the problems. So I encourage you to give it a shot and test it yourself. I mean, as I said, this is something we found that, yeah, it just works for us. Okay, so let's go forward. So we are able to test this thing. Yeah, so it's almost done. And just as I said, it works with any possible framework from our experience. So not only Angular or React, but actually everything. And if you need some kind of reports, there is also this functionality. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. You can see the what happened, what failed. You can even click it and see the screenshots, the values that you provided, and so on and so on. So the number of functionalities on Kakunin, it's quite a lot. You can, just as I said, you can check it on the Kakunin.io. So this is the main page of this project. It's open source, so feel free to have fun with it. And you can also, if you have any ideas how to improve it, then go to GitHub, create the issue there, and I'm sure we will answer as soon as possible. Okay, so, but what I want to start a discussion about now is the BDD, so behavior-driven development versus step-by-step approach. So the difference between our approach, like in most of the projects, because I'm not saying we are not using BDD at all, but what is the general difference? So let's start. We need something to test. Yeah. So probably one of the most popular websites for most of the developers is To-Do MVC. This is the kind of a product where you can create the to-do list itself and see type a title of it, click the enter button, and then it should appear on your list. You can mark it as done and see the number of active, completed, and all of the elements. Yeah. This thing, if you don't know it, you can select the framework it's implemented in. So you can choose from the Angular.js, React, probably Vue. I saw even Ember there. So yeah, so it has a lot of different frameworks. So you can check how Kakunin works with many of them at once. So in a BDD approach, we are thinking about the business. So we actually should write a custom step to follow the way the business is talking about the project itself. So it's quite a common practice to have someone from for example, the product owner or someone who knows the domain itself, to help developers to in the process of writing those scenarios, because the language here is so important, because the general idea of BDD is for business to be able to validate the scenarios. So I cannot write it using the step-by-step approach, because this approach is about the way user is interacting with your website. I need to create the steps that describe the way the business is talking about it. So I'm not clicking on the input and filling the to-do form with some kind of a value. I'm not clicking on the submit button. I am adding a new to-do with title. I'm not checking if on the list there is element with that matches the given regular expression or regular or given value or given text. Yeah, I'm checking if I'm saying that there should be to do with given name on the list. So I'm still talking it from the way the business describes it. Yeah. And the problem with it, I see, is that it requires to know the domain of the project. I mean, yeah, it's cool. I mean, everyone needs to know it at some point, but it makes it harder for new people to jump in and to write the test immediately, like almost immediately. You still need to think about the naming. You need to learn what is the vocabulary used in the whole project. And most of the time, those steps are created for just this single domain. Yeah, I mean, I cannot test e-commerce with I add a new to-do with title, even though it's actually filling the form in some way. I'm unable to do so. Of course, I can make some code of reusable. I can move it to some separate library, but still some of its implementation, it's related to the given context. And the next point, just as I said, it will for sure require quite extensively knowledge of the given language. Yeah, you cannot just hire a new person or say to manual tester that has no knowledge of JavaScript or Java to try and have fun with writing an automated test. I mean, it's impossible. You will have first you will have to learn the basic of the programming itself in order to actually make them a real test engineers, automated test engineers. So then, on the other hand, we have our approach. So this is the same test. This is the way we could write it. And this is, for example, this is a good example of the assertion we have. For example, we use this cool thing called matcher. This is this T semicolon there after that, yeah, T colon, sorry. On the 1, 2, 3, on the fourth step, there are following elements in table to-dos where we provide the column, the field we are going to test against, and just check if there is a to-do that matches the T colon. T colon is actually is the shortcut for to match the given text in this single field. Yeah, so I'm matching the T if the text contains the word, the sentence, my need to do. And the same goes with there is element described by the selector to the count, and its value should match the given regular expression, or any kind of a matcher. I mean, I can even test if the element is clickable with the Kakunin itself. Yeah, I can we have a special function called f colon is clickable, and it will just check if the element is not disabled, for example. So we describe the scenario by user, yeah, how user interacts with it. So This is dangerous. I know that it might be problematic for some of you because it's quite, I don't see this approach a lot in many systems, but it has some benefits. For example, it's much easier to share the code between. So you don't, for example, you implement something once. In our example is I fill the something form with, and I can fill any form with it. I don't have to think how to fill it. I don't need to write some custom code. I just write this single step and do not think about coding at all. I mean, we implemented it once and tested it on like 20 different projects. So what could go wrong? Yeah, and in case we find some error, then we can just fix it up and update the library itself and move on. Yeah. Another point is that it's cool. You are still able to learn the product owners how to read them. I mean, it's not so complicated. Yeah, it's actually the natural language. It's so you can actually use it as a kind of a documentation because new people can just go. This is actually something pretty similar to the way we wrote the testing scenarios in case of those documents I called at the very beginning of this presentation. So the steps you need to reproduce the given feature. Yeah, so this is quite easy for new developers to jump in, check the end-to-end test, and just go line by one and try to reproduce the given situation. For example, to check if it really works properly. Okay, so at this point, I mean, we decided that, yeah, we need the automate pretty much in our company. We matured quite a lot from the company that had no test at all to company that has wonderful test engineers who are able to extend Kakunin, to write custom code, to write the new steps, and to do manual testing and to automated testing, and what's more, to even work as a consultant for the client, to show them what should be changed in their process in order to make it better. So, but then there is the last question I want to get an answer for. It's, do we need the manual test then? Because I'm talking about automates as the like it's the solution for everything. I mean, you can test this, this, and this. Yeah. So yeah, and it will still be faster than manual test. And this is where we need to understand one thing. We still need manual tests, and the reason is very simple. Just as I said, end-to-end tests or the whole test suite you are doing are quite sensitive to maybe rather just the end-to-end tests are sensitive to UI changes. So I don't see a benefit of automated tests in a situation where we change UI a lot. I mean, you will have to change them like every second day, for example, just to make sure they work properly. And sooner or later, you'll find that maybe we could just wait a little, and until it gets stable, use the manual test. I mean, your tester needs to decide if this is the moment we should create the testing scenario for this functionality, or we should still test it manually because it's changing so much. Yeah, so this is responsibility of a good tester. You need to think if you are there, if your company is there, and if you are not, then maybe it's the good point to hire some consultant to actually help you with to make this change, make this improvement in your process. Another point is that we use the end-to-end only for most important things. This is what I told. Yes, so we need to reduce the number of end-to-ends to make our test suite to fit that frame of, for example, 20 minutes. So we are not forgetting about the other functionalities. It's not like we are skipping them. We are still testing them. Maybe not like any day, like every time we deploy something, but we are still doing those manual tests on them to check if for some reason it didn't break at some point. Yeah. The next thing is something I was asked for before is about the design tests. There are tools. I mean, I know that the most popular one is Galen, but sadly I forgot the name of the second one. But I even saw the web service that allows you to test the UI to some extent to check if it looks good, or you can even use some kind of a very simple method. I mean, create a screenshot before you start, create a screenshot of the previous iteration, create the screenshot of the current iteration, and just do the diff. Yeah, I mean, remove everything that is the same and just keep the differences. So you will see if something changed during the implementation. This is quite popular, for example, in I know this method is quite popular in many libraries. I mean, this is the way they work, actually. Yeah? So they find the differences between two images done in the different period of your application lifecycle. So I would still go with the manual test to test to test the user experience, to test how friendly it is for the user, and also if it looks good. And I mean, not like if it's properly, if it's implemented properly, but you know, we are still humans. Yeah, we can like have our own opinion about if something is good or bad. This is the feedback that machine is not going to give you. And I mean, this is quite valuable feedback, because by doing this, you can adapt your software, you can make it better. And the last point is we need to remember that end-to-end only simulates the real user. And there is a pretty common concept where you need to upload some file. And I'm not sure if you know that we are unable to interact with operating system Windows, native Windows. The way we upload file in automated tests most of the time is about passing it directly to the input itself. So it's kind of a, I mean, it's a workaround. Yeah, we are not going with, we are not doing it the way user will do the same functionality. We are actually using quite hacky approach to make it work. And the problem is that if something happens to the button, like the button won't open the file browser for user, he won't be able to upload it. And the thing is, we are actually not testing it because we are unable to. So we still need to check some functionalities using the manual test. And what's more, from what I know, there is a problem with headless browsers testing. I mean, as far as I know, there is an issue with Selenium that does not allow you to download files using the headless. Yeah, so I mean, if you want to check if some kind of during some kind of flow you get for example, the report at the end of it, so you can download it. Then, if you are using headless, then you are doomed. Yeah, it's right now it's impossible. There is an issue on Selenium. That is also the reason why why we are thinking about switching from Selenium to Puppytor, because from my experience, Selenium is so big that it's not getting changed so fast. I mean, some of the pull requests there are waiting for years to be merged, and this is not the way it should work. And it's much faster. It is much faster development process in case of the Puppytor. So yeah, so this is something it's also, it might be important for you when you decide to choose the framework itself. Okay, so what I want to end with is like, you need to aim to have a good balance of automated and manual tests. It's not like you should just throw all of your resources to automate because this is the new thing, this is something that everyone is doing and I have to do this too. No, you have to think, like, I would say that manual tests are somewhere between the integration tests and end-to-end tests. I mean, this is what the test pyramid is lacking most of the time. We don't put manual tests somewhere. So because most of the time we see them as something separate. Yeah. So we have this automated things, and we also have manual tests that we use to some extent on the different features of our application. Okay. So now is the section I was talking about before. So this is the question one. So if we have any more that we didn't answer during the presentation, then this is a good moment to type your question, and I will try to answer it as much as possible, because I see we have some few minutes. I see one problem here. Can you? Oh, yeah.
No, there are no new ones.
Yeah, but I see that there is like question. Can you go back? I have problem with my tests in Selenium. Why everything is green? Next time I have error element is not clickable at point. And this is actually about yeah. So this is why we implemented in Kakunin. We implemented some kind of a functionality that is waiting for element to really be clickable, because Selenium had this issue that when you click, for example, the element, it needs to be visible. And I'm not talking about visible by like you can see it. I mean, it must be visible to Selenium, so it cannot have anything overlapping it. So even if it's some kind of a invisible layer on it, then it might be impossible for you to click it, because I don't see it. And the fun fact is that when I click it on my browser, it will work properly, because we have this thing called event bubbling. Yeah, so we are when we click something, the events are passed all the way down. So things underneath, of course, if we don't specify otherwise, the things underneath are also clicked. But in case of Selenium, it works kind of differently. I mean, it's not always passing those events all the way down. So your element could be unclickable because something is over it and you don't see it. So that's why we added some functionality to Cocooning. So we are actually waiting for element to be clickable before we click it. So we can like catch this error and decide what to do. I see a new question. Do you test mobile app? If yes, what are you using? Okay, so this is a good question. It depends what we are thinking about what we understand by mobile apps. If it's about the native ones, then we had a shot for Appium, because right now Kakunin is mostly about the web apps. Yeah, we are thinking about how to introduce it to mobile apps, but yeah, this is something that will take some time for us to actually go there. But we tested Appium, and it actually worked pretty good. But at the end, we stopped it. I mean, because we would have to learn, teach our developers once again to learn that new thing, that new framework, and we also found that it gets kind of unstable for some cases. So sometimes it just broke like on their own. Yeah, but in case of a React app, we used a tool called Detox. Quite a cool tool. It also works with both iOS and Android version. I remember that our team who created the few React Native application used it, and we even thought how to integrate with Kakunin. But again, at the time, so we had to slow down, and for now we don't think about it. Does Kakunin has an integration with browser mob proxy or other tool that provides caching traffic? And yes, we have this functionality. We are actually adding more and more integration with the external tools. We are even thinking about adding some kind of special steps to test the performance of the application. Not only to catch the request, but also to like give you some, like you could be able to specify that, for example, this request, this flow should be executed in the maximum of, I don't know, 2 seconds. And if it's not, then you get the warning that, it's too slow. You need to inform your developers that something is not so fast as it should be. Yeah. So yeah, we have this integration. You can go to the documentation available on Kakunin.io once again, and there should be information how to execute it, how to connect it, and how to use it in your application. Okay, I think that's all. So thank you for today. If you still have any question, or if after the webinar you will find something that you want to ask for, then feel free to send an email to me, adampolak@tsh.io. I'm sure I will answer it as soon as possible. And so thank you once again, and probably see you next time. Yeah. So bye, guys.